So I'm John Heitzinger, and I work for Soligie. I'm the president there. And in this presentation, I'll go through a brief introduction to Soligie, talk at a high level about printed and flexible electronics, and then really move into some of the commercialization challenges. And I'd like to spend a fair bit of time looking at some specific examples that we've had the pleasure of working on. Two of these examples have been successful, two of them not yet. So I wanted to give everyone in the audience a bit of a dose of reality because, of course, not everything works. And then summarize. So, get started. So Soligie is really an electronics services provider. And what we really do is provide a variety of services to our customers. One of the things that we've realized is that the space of printed and flexible electronics is really relatively immature, and because of that, our customers don't always know what's required and what is feasible. So the services we provide may range from doing proof of feasibility studies, making proof of concept devices and circuits. Moving along in maturity, we'll create prototypes of different circuits, devices, and products. We'll collaborate with customers and do full-on product development with them. And then ultimately, what we would like to do is volume manufacturing of printed and flexible electronics. As was mentioned, Soligie was founded in 2005. We're actually a wholly owned subsidiary of a company called Taylor Corporation. And Taylor Corporation really got its roots in the graphics printing world, and over the last 10 to 15 years has diversified substantially. And the printed electronics company, Soligie, is really quite a new direction for them. But it really brings together the expertise in printing, using that as a manufacturing process, and electronics, and marries those together. And we're based in Savage, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. Okay, the markets that we focus on, there's really four. We've focused on the consumer goods market. And actually, in that space, we didn't intend to really have a sizable business in that space, but we're pulled there by customers. A space that's particularly interesting is the medical space, because customers in that space are typically early adopters of new technology. They're really looking to be at the forefront of development. The military space, of course, is very interesting. Size, weight, power. These are all things that printed and flexible electronics can address. And so we have a number of programs with both the Army as well as the Air Force. And finally, a space that we call security and logistics. And this would include things such as RFID labels, as well as tamper-evident or tamper-proof packaging. So a variety of things. And just to look at the pictures here, so one of the goals in printed and flexible electronics, of course, is to move away from PCB boards that are like this, rigid, reasonably heavy, to something that is more friendly for a variety of applications. So this is essentially a printed PCB board. It's got a printed silver ground plane. It's got 2 layers of printed silver interconnects. It's got 2 layers of dielectric, and it's got 3 different values of printed resistors on this. And also, you can't quite see it here, but in the picture you can see that there are quite a number of traditional silicon die that can be attached to this as well to provide that high level of performance that you need in certain cases. So that's kind of the goal, to move from something that's rigid, non-flexible, non-conformable, to something that is lightweight, flexible, and rugged. Okay, so that's really where a lot of the possibilities lie with printed and flexible electronics. And in fact, I really like to call the space additive manufacturing of electronics, because printing is really just one of the manufacturing techniques that can be used. You can use spray deposition, coating, vapor deposition, vacuum deposition, all sorts of different processes that can contribute to success in manufacturing of flexible electronics. But as our previous speaker talked about, there are a number of advantages, size, weight, as was mentioned, but also conformability. So if you think about the medical space specifically, and physiological monitoring or even delivery of drugs, you want electronic devices that are very comfortable to wear, because if they're not comfortable to wear, the patient simply will not wear them. And also more rugged and reliable products. So some of the nice work that the Flexible Display Center has done with the flexible displays is really centered around durability. And they have a very nice video on their site where it shows a display that's flexible, basically undergoing a boot kick test. And so you have a weight that's just smashing into a flexible display, and it just keeps functioning perfectly well. Whereas a glass display, of course, gets smashed and is non-operable. So one of the big goals really is to produce new products that fulfill customer desires. So on the lower left here, I've got a picture of a product that Nike has taken to market. It's their Nike Plus training platform. And so that has a variety of pressure sensors in the device, but it also has a small electronics puck, if you will, embedded in it that has a microcontroller and a radio that can communicate with a smartphone. UAV, just an example of one of the military applications where certainly a reduction in weight is going to benefit in terms of operational life. And then I have a picture of a flexible display, and in the middle right, just a picture of a concept for physiological monitoring where a patch is applied to a patient and it can measure a variety of different physiological parameters such as heart rate, EKG, respiration, and so on. Okay, so if you think about electronics, of course, and manufacturing electronics, you need to think about what all the building blocks are, what's really needed. And probably most of you are familiar with some of the building blocks. Of course, you need components, right? So you need resistors, you need some source of power, which usually comes in the form of batteries, but could also come from a wall plug or a supercapacitor. Transistors as building blocks for logic and analog circuits. Memory cells to store information. Diodes, displays, interconnect switches, lights, and so on. So I've got a few pictures here of printed resistors. Also brought with me some examples of printed batteries. So this is a printed battery. This particular version is made by a company called Blue Spark. It's small, thin, flexible. It's got about 25 milliamp hour capacity. If you compare that to a coin cell battery, typical coin cell battery is going to have about 200 milliamp hour capacity. This is a lithium-based thin, flexible battery. This is not printed, but it's thin and flexible. There's been a fair amount of success with these type of batteries in the smart card business space. So a couple of examples there. Another thing I want to show you, and well, maybe I'll hold on and show you that later. But in addition to components, you also need to have the ability to design the circuits. So you need to develop design guidelines and design rules. You need schematics and layout capability, assembly and integration techniques. So what you use in the traditional electronics assembly may not apply when you move to, in fact, certainly won't apply when you move to the flexible electronic space. And finally, you need test and inspection methods. And this is a paradigm that I would say the industry is really still wrestling with. Consider if you can make 1 million circuits in a day, how are you going to inspect and test all of those? And so the test and inspection piece can really drive a large fraction of the cost component of these circuits, depending on the particular application and the requirements for testing based on the customer needs. Okay. So, in thinking about the printed and flexible electronic space, one of the complicating factors is that there's really a wide variety of different approaches and different technologies and different processing capabilities. What we have to do as a commercial entity is really assess the maturity of those different technologies as well as the processes. So we actually leverage something that was invented by the military. We use technology readiness levels and manufacturing readiness levels. So it's a fairly simple paradigm. If you have a low technology readiness level of 1 or 2, that means that your technology has maybe been demonstrated as a proof of concept in the lab space. Whereas if you have a high technology readiness level, 8 or 9, then it's been flight proven or proven in the field. Similarly for manufacturing readiness, if you have a low manufacturing readiness level of 1 or 2, that means, yeah, you've made a few in the lab and maybe you started to think about how you're going to manufacture these in volume, whereas a manufacturing readiness level of 8 or 9 really means that you're ready to go to market. You've been able to manufacture these in volume, at least at a pilot level, and have a robust, characterized process. Okay, so I mentioned the components for electrical circuits. A wide variety of different components are needed depending on the specific application. And so as a commercial entity, what you need to do is really bring those different components together and make sure that they're all going to play nice together so that you can provide a solution to the customer. And then thinking about processes, even if you just limit yourself to thinking about printing as a manufacturing process, there are a wide variety of different printing techniques that you need to evaluate. And each of them have their own benefits and risks. So you can think about flatbed screen printing, rotary screen printing, flexography-based printing, gravure, as well as inkjet. But then you have to also choose techniques for circuit assembly. Maybe you need to have copper in your circuit. Well, there's no really good commercially available copper inks, so perhaps you employ a plating approach. Converting is really, in general, a means of taking a product and putting it in its final form factor. So that can be done either in a sheet-based process or in a roll-to-roll fashion. A lot of different processes that you have to think about there as well. Die cutting, lamination, simple things such as slitting and lamination. Some companies use photolithography, which is a very mature technology in the silicon space, significantly less mature when you move to a flexible substrate, and so you have different constraints. And of course, I mentioned film deposition or material deposition, a wide variety of different processes that you can take advantage of there for manufacturing as well. All right, so in thinking about challenges from a high level, really I like to put them in 3 different categories. And these really apply to pretty much any business that's trying to take a new technology or a new product that involves new technology to market. So you have to think about your value proposition, right? So who is your customer and how is your product going to provide benefit to them? And what is your product? That may sound like a silly question, but in fact, we've had to ask ourselves multiple times throughout Soligie's evolution, okay, what really is our product and how do our customers benefit from that? Once you've got those figured out, then you really also have to ask yourself, what's the appropriate business model? And there are a lot of choices. You could provide components, you could provide finished goods, you could license intellectual property. So you have to understand, based on the gaps in the supply chain, where your business model can provide value. All of those questions are related. You also have to assess the technology, of course. And, speaking to engineers and scientists, we have a natural tendency to focus on technology. But you have to be realistic, and even the large companies of the world have to step back and say, what are we going to develop? What can we buy? How can we access other companies' intellectual property that will complement our product and strengthen our business model. Again, what's the maturity of that technology? Are we going to need to go through 2 years of development with a technology partner or internally in order to get to a point where we can actually commercialize the technology, or is it ready to go right now? And then when you're thinking about electronic circuits, you have to think about whether or not those technologies are going to integrate well together. So there are a couple of ways to think about integration. One, there are materials challenges. So if you're performing manufacturing step number 1 may have an impact on manufacturing step number 2 and number 3 and so on. But then also from a performance perspective, you have to think about your components. So if I use a thin, flexible battery, will it be able to have the capacity and the peak current that's required in order to drive my circuit for the operational life that I need? Will those technologies and those components be able to have a shelf life that's going to survive the 1 year where it sits in the warehouse before it goes to the retail space and then gets put on the shelf, and then a customer purchases it, and then it needs to operate? And then finally, market requirements. And again, these are straightforward business things to think about, but specs, pricing, delivery, and support. How is your business going to do all of those things? And maybe you can outsource some of those. Maybe you can partner. So these are kind of high-level things that you need to think about in commercializing products. So if I could point to one thing within the printed and flexible electronics space, or again, as I like to call it, additive manufacturing of electronics, it really is that the entire ecosystem is really quite immature. So I think this is different than a lot of other businesses and a lot of other markets. If you think about the semiconductor space, for example, if you want to bring out a new processing tool that'll process wafers, there's an enormous infrastructure that you can take advantage of. There's existing wafers, existing devices, other tools that you can look at. You can outsource manufacturing. You can buy components that are very mature. That simply doesn't exist within the printed and flexible electronics space. So from materials, being really relatively immature with a handful of materials that you can reach out, buy, put on the shelf, function well. You can put them in your printing press. They'll last the entire printing run and give you good results. Really very small number of those materials, a lot more materials in development. So if you think about graphene, and probably a number of you are very interested in graphene, that is a material that we stay away from because it is so immature. Equipment, similar story. There's a lot of equipment out there, but none of it is really specifically designed for printed and flexible electronics. I mentioned electrical components, and really what we've found is that there's a gap in capability. So yes, printed batteries exist. Yes, printed transistors exist. Printed memory cells exist. Their performance is here. What I need is up here. Actually, what the customer needs is up here. So how do we bridge that gap? That's a challenge that we face. Some other things that are true also is that standards, design rules, and test methods, there's really no consensus in the space about any standards, design rules, and certainly not about test methods. Something as simple as doing a bend and flex test on a flexible substrate. There's really no well-defined standard that works for the wide variety of applications. Another thing is that customers are really fairly unaware of what's capable, what's feasible, and what's not. And so what we have to do as a company is really help guide them. And so a part of our business really ends up being consulting. And so we consult with customers from that concept stage all the way through to commercialization. We also partner with technology development companies. with our business model, we actually try to stay away from technology development and look for technologies that are ready or near ready to deploy. But even when we do that, we find companies that really struggle to scale up and meet the needs. Some examples, we've worked with companies on an electrolyte for electrochromic displays. The material works great in the lab. We put it in the press. It lasts for 10 minutes before it goes bad and starts giving bad results. So there is an awareness that the technology development company didn't have that we bring to the forefront. It's good for them. They have this awareness and they have a path that they know they need to take in terms of improving their product. It makes it difficult for commercialization because now you have to add another project on that you weren't expecting to perform, and that lengthens that time and the effort to commercialization. And finally, manufacturers may not be able to provide a total solution. So, we've run into customers who are very frustrated in the space because they've had to try and go to 4 or 5 different companies to try and piece together this puzzle in order to get a total solution for them. Now, we try to do that within Soligie. I'd like to think that most of the time we're successful, but there are some times that we're not. And frankly, sometimes we'll tell customers, this project is not for us. It's just not a good fit. So that's a little bit of information about the ecosystem. And I'd like to move on now and talk about some specific examples. And the first one I'm going to talk about is a smart blister pack. So some time ago, we were approached by a company to work on a smart blister pack, and I've got an example here. So the concept really is that you've got a blister pack that's filled with medication. And what you want to do is really just detect when this medication is dispensed, use that action to inform the patient that they're doing a good job, or if it's missed, inform them that they've missed that medication and they need to go back and take it. So this particular device is fairly simple. You push the medication through the blister pack. It breaks a resistive trace. That change in resistance can be detected by some traditional electronics, and you can then notify the patient. So you can do that either through a phone call or through a text messaging service. Great idea, right? It's been around for about 15 years. And it has yet to be, in my assessment, really successfully commercialized. So why is that? And I won't say that I have all the answers, but certainly one of the challenges is that if you think about medication adherence, the ecosystem is very complicated. So on the right side, you've got the patient, right? And generally, most of these businesses that have pursued the smart blister pack have thought really only about the patient who's going to take the medication. Okay, but really you've got the caregivers who may be helping or assisting that patient take their medication. You've got the physician, you've got the pharmacy, you've got the employer who provides benefit, health plans. You've also got pharmacy benefits manager. Now, my guess is that most of you have never even heard of a pharmacy benefits manager and certainly don't know what a pharmacy benefits manager does. But they play a very crucial role in this ecosystem, as does the pharma manufacturer. And so with these green arrows, I've just plotted the flow of money because, of course, if you're thinking about commercial activity, you need to understand where the money's going and find those entities that have a bunch of it. Okay, so this is just showing you that when you think about medication adherence, there are a lot of different stakeholders and they have different interests. Another important aspect when you think about medication adherence is, well, where does the information flow? And today, it kind of looks like this. You've got the patient, they go to the pharmacy, they pick up their drugs. Maybe there's a little bit of information that gets transacted there. Maybe you've got a caregiver who comes in and helps grandma out once a week with her medication, or maybe it's a daily event. And you got the physician who, of course, prescribes. So very inefficient information flow. What you'd really like to do is have a much more robust information flow where you get the health plan involved, you get the pharmacy benefits manager involved, you may even get the employer involved, and ultimately work that all the way back to the pharmacy and the pharmaceutical manufacturer so that you create this community of care and really provide a wide variety of benefits to different stakeholders in this ecosystem. So, our assessment of why medication adherence programs have by and large failed, and certainly why the Smart Blister Pack has failed, is that companies have really focused on this hardware solution. Hey, the technology works. Why can't I sell my product? Well, it's because they're really not addressing the needs in the ecosystem. So what we believe is that a successful solution will have these characteristics. It'll have a means of patient engagement, really get that patient involved. Maybe that means gamification. Maybe it means, Grandpa gets a picture of the day of, the biggest fish caught this month. You need to form this community of care that involves a variety of these stakeholders, and you need to provide benefit to those stakeholders. And you need to have this ability to collect and aggregate data so that the healthcare plans and the pharmacy benefits managers can mine that data and really come up with clever ways to influence the patient's behavior. So our assessment is that the lack of success with the Smart Blister Pack really has very little to do with the technology and has everything to do with the wrong business models and the wrong approach. Okay, so the next example is really considering the smart shelf, and there are a variety of different incarnations of smart shelves. I've got a simple example here. I talked about this, and I'm not sure this will be visible or not, but I've got a thin pressure sensor here that was fabricated by Soligie. It's made on a couple of sheets of plastic film. It's based on force-sensitive resistors. So when I press the red area here, the LED under the red lights. When I press the yellow button, the LED above the yellow sticker lights, and so on. Nice, thin, flexible, relatively low cost. Okay. So what the customer really wants, he doesn't really care what kind of technology you use. What he wants is improved accuracy of his inventory, and he wants to reduce the labor associated with making sure that that inventory is accurate and that all the shelves are stocked. So can you use a distributed sensor network to do that? And the answer is yes. Once you have that understanding of what the customer needs are, then you need to think about the specific application and choose an appropriate technology. So there are a variety of technologies that have been looked at. Certainly RFID has been implemented for a number of applications. You can use capacitive sensing. You could use photodetectors or even cameras in certain applications. And pressure sensors, which is the path that we've gone down. So then in thinking about commercialization, so you understand what the customer really wants. You've got a technology that you think will work. I encourage everyone to choose a simple application to go to market with. The simpler, the better. Gets your foot in the door, gives you some experience. So that is indeed what we've done. 5 minutes? Okay. Choosing a simple one where the warehouse is set up in a very rigid way. Each compartment has its own part. It's always put in the same place. So by knowing the location and having a sensor, you can detect the boxes that are in place and very easily do your inventory. So we've been successful with this, and with this product, we've developed the technology. We've chosen partners that have existing sales and distribution in the space, and we'll be shipping product into this space in fourth quarter this year. The next example is an IONTOPHORETIC drug delivery patch. So I've got an example of that product here. In this case, it's a combination of a usable, reusable electronics and disposable electronics. Our focus at Soligie was to develop this disposable part primarily printing electrodes and contacts, but working really with a four-partner team with the customer who is driving the project, a converting partner, and a product design partner as well. So this, again, is a great idea where the company wanted to be able to supply very simple drug delivery without needles to patients. A lot of people are really concerned about needles and have a great fear of them. So the way this works is you have a release liner, you pull the release liner off, you stick the patch on your skin, you apply the electronics puck, press the button, and it starts driving an electrical current, which will then cause the drug to be dispensed into the bloodstream. So two problems were encountered. One was that we had the Great Recession, which really caused some financial problems for the parent company trying to take this to market. And second is, this is a device, but the customer really hadn't done enough homework and found a pharmaceutical partner to partner with in the time frame that they had available. So they had a certain amount of runway, they ran out of cash, they had to shut down. So this product, while being great, again, was not commercialized. There's still hope. They're still trying to work on it and raise some funds in order to do that. Final example is in the RFID space. And if you think back 10 years, there was a lot of hype in the RFID space. Trillions of tags are going to be needed, and it's going to be this explosive growth. The Walmart directive helped fuel that. But what people really didn't realize is that the RFID market is actually very fragmented with many different applications, many different technology needs, and there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So we initially stayed away from the RFID space, and it really wasn't until last year when we jumped in, and really it was when we figured out where we could differentiate ourselves, and that is in a product that is made roll-to-roll with technology that we have access to and is fairly mature, and really focused on access control, where the label, if you tamper with it, it gets destroyed and will no longer function. Some of the competing products will get damaged, but they still function. So our product has a distinct advantage. So there's an element of timing in how you commercialize, as well as some good luck. All right, so that is my last example there. I'll summarize now and just say that I really do believe that printed and flexible electronics does hold great promise. We believe that there will be revolutionary products that ultimately will be taken to market. I think a primary challenge in the space is this immature ecosystem, and that really involves everything from materials to equipment to partner companies, as well as customers. And what we're finding right now is that most of the successes in the space are really based on taking a component to market, such as a flexible display, or taking a hybrid approach, as was talked about, where you will combine a printed and flexible element with maybe a traditional element, or put a thin, flexible microprocessor on a thin, flexible substrate, which is something we're really very interested in pursuing and are going down that path. And ultimately, then, you also have to understand the technology limitations and apply the appropriate business approach to be successful. Thank you.
So that's kind of where the flexible electronics and the flexible display effort within the Army was born, was to think about ways that you could get information on the soldier, get a display on the soldier, and get it on him